Okay, man, dads, mums, whoever's listening, um, we're really blessed to have Jim the Wild Man Taylor here. Real blessing for me. Met Jim almost 2 years ago at a spiritual retreat, which we'll touch on later. This guy, his team, the spirit, the environment took me to a place in my soul that I had just never been. Um, and uh, and so, in essence of what we are setting out to accomplish here for stress-free dads, we're focusing on stress-free marriage, stress-free money, stress-free body. So this component here with Jim is the stress-free body in the sense of spirituality, emotional content, how to unstress and unburden that part of man. Jim's going to be guiding us, teaching us, loving on us. And he's this beautiful, huge Texan guy with a monstrous beard, beautiful groomed hair, um, with a beautiful wife, beautiful family. This guy's got it made. He's a pastor of a church down in Texas, right outside of San Antonio. I sort of pretended to Jim I knew where that was, but I have no idea. It's just over there somewhere. So welcome Jim Taylor.
Thank you, Ben. That was quite an introduction. If they can't see us, they have quite some image. I'm not sure.
Jim's a guy. If you met Jim in the street, you wouldn't want to tangle with this guy, right? But he hides his steely exterior. He's not got a steely exterior. It hides the size of a heart that is rare in men. Honestly, I thought I was able to go to vulnerable places. Jim's just shining a light for me, teaching me how to do more of that as a man, become a more loving husband, father, better business owner, more responsible with the choices I make in life, etc., etc. So, Jim, can you just give us a real whistle stop of how we got here to this place, to this point? Where did you grow up? What kind of shit was flung at you? Just take it away, bud.
Well, these days I described to myself my story. I was a man, a boy born into a family of chaos. Both parents alcoholics and desperately lost in that. So I know firsthand what it looks like when families come apart, and they unravel at a rate that becomes exponential. Um, Richard Rohr, who is a mentor of mine, has a phrase: "You're only as sick as your secrets." And oftentimes our closest secrets are held with those closest to us. And a tool that has helped me on my spiritual journey is called the Enneagram. And it says that we reserve the worst of our disintegration for those closest to us. And it's sort of the curse hidden in the blessing of having intimacy. You're going to get all of it. And I think those of us who are longing for, to be healthy and grounded human beings and be in relationships that are cultivating wholeness and healthiness and beauty, we're gonna pay attention to all of that, not in a way that curses us or condemns us, but as a way of seeing the path through. How do those things become something that actually takes us deeper into our own spiritual journey, and we come through it together. So for me, that happened. It's a whole lifetime. I joked with you earlier, said it's a long story. I have no idea how to bring that into some sort of tight woven idea, but all I can say is that God found me in the middle of that story of chaos and God, lost is the right word. You know, when I think back to my early childhood days, and yet such a longing in me who, before I even knew that I knew God, I was already breeze of the Spirit of God blowing in my little six beyond all of this. And it launched me out on what many describe as a hero's journey for my life. And it was working through my own story to arrive into this place where there's generativity and beauty and groundedness and humility. But it came at the end of a long, long journey. I had a few dragons in there to slay, Ben. So,
Jim, as Richard says, what we don't transform, we transmit.
yes.
And so I was the guy who was working harder to transform my results faster to try and get ahead of those dragons. And I was lucky enough that they caught up with me and had their way with me, and I had to come to a very abrupt halt, which started my recovery, I guess you could say. And how you put it there, you're only as sick as your secret. So we've got a whole world of men out there that have secrets that they're hoping they can just keep in the ground where they hopefully buried them, and they're done. That's in the past. That was done. Don't need to revisit that. What's the value? Yet it's choking them to death spiritually and emotionally every day. So someone cuts across them in a car, and they're entrenched in the entire reason I'm angry right now is because of this butt munch in front of me. And the truth is that's 10% of their reaction. They've got 90% of their reaction is a whole bunch of stuff that they can barely remember. And that is responsible for their whole reaction to the event. So Jim, can you just share with us what is the problem with the heart of man right now? And that's a big question. And particularly for those of us listening in that are going, well, Ben's opening up this idea of spirituality or doing some spiritual work. Some people are hearing this for the very first time, and they're going, I got this pretty much together. I just like the content this guy's kicking out. How can we be helpful to those people to just open up a door a tiny bit, or even realize a door is there for them to learn about?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, Ben. It's you could write a book on it. So I'll just try to hit some point in the middle of all of that conversation. And I would like to say to your listeners, if anything I could give you is a tool, a spiritual tool to work into those places that are often hidden from ourselves. And some of it that bubbles up and we become aware of, but it's often the darker sides of things. It's called the Enneagram, ENNEAGRAM. And you could almost look at it like a personality sort of story describing the different kinds of ways that we show up in the world as human beings. But that would only be an entry level. What is so helpful about the Enneagram is that it helps us discover our core wound. And as you indicated in the question, we think that the guy that cut us off in front of us, or our wife or partner, when they've done something, that the anger or the shame that we experience, or the fear, or whatever great emotion comes surfacing, is driven by that particular thing. And if they would just do it right or fix it, everything would sort of come together for us. And yet we never stop to realize that doesn't happen. No matter how well things seem to be put together, we still have these anxieties and fears and stresses and struggles that are driving us. And most of the time it's unconscious, as you indicated. We're asleep to that. And a real spiritual journey, it helps us wake up to what is unconsciously driving us. So whatever you're doing that you consider as spiritual practice or deepening your own spiritual journey, if it's not waking you up to what is unconsciously driving you, I would say get a new practice, you know. And another way to say that, if your practice isn't enlarging your capacity to move through this world gracefully, get a new practice. And I'm not speaking, you know, essentially as morality. I'm talking about these deep qualities of love and kindness and compassion and generativity, which is really what, in my opinion, spirituality, you know, is all about. So I hope that got somewhere close.
You mentioned the core wound, Jim. Can you, for people that might have heard that expression for the first time, can you just add a bit more flesh on that? What does that mean to a guy?
So maybe I can just talk about myself for a second. That's
Please.
The Enneagram. Yeah, it really opened up for me the opportunity to look inside and see what's been driving Jim Taylor all of his life. And all my life, since that little 6-year-old boy made this promise, I remember sitting, you know, at the crack of a door, looking down a long hallway and seeing my mom and dad just screaming at the top of their lungs and at one another. It was too, you know, in the middle of the night. I was scared to death. And I remember making this promise, I'll never live like that. But I had no idea, you know, what that meant as a 6-year-old. So what I did is what a lot of, I think, people do, is I tried to outrun all of that by being you know, just the top of my game, whatever it was. And if you look back over my life, I was always there, right there at the top, front row student, straight A's, you know, you wouldn't think so with all this hair, would you? But I couldn't have long hair back there, Ben. I had short hair because I was a good boy and I followed all the rules and I did everything the teacher said. And when the church came along, I jumped through all their hoops. And the mistake I made in my first half life was that I thought that because I was doing everything so well and I was succeeding at everything, that I was just really good at everything. I'm just good. And I was dedicated, you know, I had all these other words, you know, I'm disciplined, I'm dedicated, you know, hardworking, blah, blah, blah. And culture applauds all of that. So I got lots of little, you know, yay, attaboys, you know, we call them over here. And it literally took into my second half of life in doing this kind of spiritual work with the Enneagram to discover that what was driving me all that time was my core wound. And my core wound as a 1 on the Enneagram is that I'm just not good enough. And I came into the world with this wound that was present to me unconsciously. It was there, hidden below the surface as a starting point for me. You are not good enough. And it was reinforced everywhere I looked because, you know, my parents were, you know, unable to meet me where I was as a little boy. And my little mind translated that as, well, I'm not good enough. That's why they're doing all this stuff. If I could just be good enough, well, they would quit drinking and we'd have Leave It to Beaver family, you know, and my dad would be Ward Cleaver. It'd be so great. He'd help me, with my life. And so I translated everything as, if I could just be a little bit better, life would work out for me and people would love me and, things would be good. And I literally, that's why I jumped through all those hoops all my life. I had to be at the top of my game. I could not afford to fail, you see. I couldn't afford to just come in middle ground. That would just affirm to my core wound that you're right. You're not good enough. So
you're in a room full of people responding to their core wound who are fundamentally comparing themselves to you and running their own crazy race of insanity. And so you move ahead in the polls and you're whooping and hollering. They're envious of you. They work a bit harder. This very binary, even when you say it out loud, it sounds so childlike in nature. The kind of conclusion you're making is preposterous to say, as an adult now, if I work harder, I'll be more lovable. Or if I work a bit harder at fixing this thing faster, then I'll be enough. Like, what does that even mean? It sounds ridiculous. Yet that inner world, that inner childlike logic is still so rock solid. Unfortunately, is almost the cornerstone of our makeup before stuff seriously starts to fall apart for you. And that's what I'm assuming started to happen, Jim. You got hit round the head with a spanner to start to wake up.
Well, so I hope we'll talk about exhaustion at some point here.
Please do. Yeah. Exhausted and stress. Yes, please. Yeah.
Because I'm sure we live in an exhausted culture. And so maybe I'll just do this. I'll say what you just said. I became exhausted with that way of living, because when is fast enough? When is doing it better enough? There's no end. I remember being in my second master's degree program, and my particular school had this, they were trying to up it, up the bar. So instead of over here, you make a 90%, on a test or something, that's at the beginning of an A. It's an A minus, but it's still in the A range. Well, they would up it. 94 now was an A minus. You had to make 94% to make an A minus. And I never knew how to study for a 94. I had to make an A. That was the ground rule. I could not be in the B range. Forget anything else. But how do you study for a 94? So I would always make nearly 100% all the way through. And I'd always say to myself, God, I studied way too hard for that, because it was, I nailed it. And I would always sort of lament, God, I wish I knew where that 94 mark was so I could study just to that. And I did my whole life that way. Richard Rohr, so I hope I don't quote him too often, but he's influenced me. He says the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And again, it goes back to the core wound. Of course it is. If you've got this core wound driving you unconsciously, you don't even know what it is. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so the way I would do success is the same way I would do failure. And I didn't know how to put those two things. If you'd have told me that, I would have not even understood. What the hell does that even mean? But all the while I was succeeding, it looked like I was failing in my own spiritual grounding, my own spiritual life, because the great virtues were hidden beyond my sight. Virtues like grace. You can't know grace, Ben, unless you have failure. It's in my mind, it's one of the greatest virtues, if not the greatest virtue, is grace, to know forgiveness and love and welcome, regardless of your ability to perform or to meet someone else's expectations or even your own expectations, to be loved and found beautiful just because you are. That's grace. But if you're succeeding all the time, you can actually think you don't need grace. That's for those other poor suckers out there.
You know, and now I've got this whole entourage of a following because they're in love with Ben's mask. And so now Ben's going, do they love me or do they love me or do they love the mask?
Like, yeah, you got to up the game all the time.
Where am I? Mm-hmm. I had no idea where I was, and I pretended I did. And here's as much as I knew about where I was. I knew I was very good at getting people to like me and doing what they wanted me to do. I was very good at that. And then I was just this empty vessel, this chameleon of, I know I show up like that on the Enneagram as well as an unredeemed person, but just such an empty, shallow existence, just, yes. So
it may be the starting place, Ben, so if anyone out there is saying, yeah, that's right where I am. I don't know that you can get to the deeper parts of who you really are, who you're meant to be in this world without going through the more shallow, reality. Jung talked about that as the ego, and we say in our work all the time, you're not trying to kill the ego. The young man and woman has to develop a healthy ego. That's the goal of your spiritual work at that time. So you participate with the false self is what you're describing, the masks that we wear. And, we become a student of our culture and look around and say, well, what works? What gets people ahead? Oh, well, okay, I'll do that. I'll jump through those hoops. And we wear those masks. And rarely we'll even stop and ask, does this mask even fit me? But when we start noticing the masks don't fit so well anymore, I think we're on the beginning of something, a threshold. And usually a person hits mid-30s, early 40s, mid-40s, right in there. I think those masks don't, work so well for us. And that's a good thing. It's life imposing itself upon us to take us into the next incarnation of ourselves. And if we're awake enough, and many people aren't, if we're awake enough, we will allow that dissonance to have its way with us. It's painful. It is not a fun experience to move us into that next incarnation.
I'm going to just share a poem in a moment. Jim, if I forget, we'll come back to pain. Primarily the reason why we ain't in no hurry to look at this stuff, because it hurts. Go and have a look at what I buried 15, 16 years ago that I was sure never to have to look at again.
Right.
That's not a walk in the park, skipping around, planting, holding daisies with my kids. That's not what it is. It's what I need to do if I want to be happy and truly free. But it isn't what I want to do. What I want to do is get a bit more money, get a bit more praise, feel a bit more exalted off of my own steam. Don't need what is it? Richard says he doesn't say grace, but he says comfortable. The comfortable don't need to change.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The comfortable don't need to change a thing because they're comfortable, so they've got no problems.
That's why all great spiritual transformation happens in liminal space, because it's a liminal space is that in between when things aren't going so well or have been going, you think, pretty well, and when they're not going so well. And it's that in between. That's when the heat comes on, the fires. And we have the opportunity in those moments of liminal space to 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 move to the next whatever that is. I don't like to talk about it in terms of getting better and better. That's already that Western idea. It's an idea from modernity that hasn't served us very well. Now, I think your generation and the one behind you has probably already thrown that out. I don't know for sure. You can tell me, but when I was growing up, it was always you're getting better all the time. And the spiritual. You're, a my background is Christianity, so you knew you were a good Christian if you were just, getting better all the time, reading the Bible more, going to church more, saving more people. You're doing the whole church, the whole thing. But I know better now. It's that ability to be present and to welcome beauty from anything that's in front of you. So those kinds of things start to happen.
Here's because we're going to enter on a topic that might be a challenge for people to hear. We're going to head into a little bit of poetry, something that Jim is entirely responsible for introducing me to.
Oh, hallelujah.
And poetry was for the weird, mainly because I didn't understand it before Jim started spouting this poetry to me. I'm going, what? Well, and there was something in me that was just said, yeah. It just said, yeah, like feet, offering a drink to a very, very thirsty heart. So this is by Tom Hirons. It's called Milk and Stars. My heart is cracked up. I fill it and then it is empty. I forget everything of worth. Then remember and forget, and remember again and forget. One day when idiocy's mystique has rubbed off like lacquer from precious oak, I'll forget so utterly, or remember so well, that I will not forget to dance. And I'll remember my way to that home beyond all memory and its loss, the place where you are waiting with your hands of milk and stars. I'm too fascinated still by the varieties of foolishness to come home just yet from this carnival of perplexing wonder, light and dark. But I know the sun is shining there, and the air is sweet as only coming home can be. One day I'll walk up the white stone path to that familiar door in the woodland, on the island at the edge of the world. But I will not be there to arrive, only my dancing, my memory, my echo, the footsteps of fire on water, the everlasting bird that flies through the blessed earth. And for me, I can't tell you what every line means. There's a paradigm it opens up for me, and the earthiness of his words just ground me as a man in the earth. What a master. Takes me beyond the thinking that I tune into day in, day out, back to that core wound. That's where it sits for me. Jim, can you lead us into a little bit of Father Hunger, a piece around Father Hunger? Some people listening again might not have ever heard of this. What does that expression mean to you? And can you flesh it out a bit for us?
Well, I can begin with a personal story. When I was growing up, my dad was unavailable to me emotionally. He was there. He was a disciplinarian, and told me what I was to be doing with myself, and let me know when I wasn't doing it well enough. He did those kinds of things, but he wasn't there for me in the deeper sense of that. And I found that hunger just growing for my dad to show up. And, the lament of many people, men and women, both, is that their fathers never showed up for them in that deeper way. They might have provided well, or even been good men, so to speak. They just, for whatever reasons, weren't able to meet us in that place, and whatever that is, that longing that we have in us for the Father, and I would call it the divine Father. It's really pointing us towards the divine masculine and the divine feminine. We have a mother hunger as well, but the father hunger seems to capture, and you'll hear it in people's stories over and over, how they long for their father to show up, and often the lament that he was not able to. For me, I wanted to hear three things from my dad. I wanted him to tell me that I was a good son. That was the thing, my core wound. You're a good son, Jim. And I wanted him to tell me that he was proud of me. And then, most importantly, I wanted him to say, I love you. And I don't know what it was about his generation, because this seems very consistent when I talk to men in their 60s and older. Their dads just could not say those things. Now, my generation, and one right below me, probably yours, we went the complete other way. I bet I told my kids I loved them 75 times a day. I'm proud of you. You belong here. You're such a good daughter. I have 3 daughters. So I don't know what your generation's going to say about the father wound and the father hunger. But what I do know is that no matter how hard we try as parents, so if you have a lot of parents listening, no matter how hard you try, if you're a man or a woman, a father or a mother, you are going to wound your children. It is inevitable. And I'm not talking about like my parents, they were alcoholics. Well, no wonder you were wounded. No, I'm talking about these little ways of how we exchange, and their core wound mixing with our core wound. And those core wounds are having a conversation that none of us even really are privy to. And we wound one another. And I'll say this, our children wound us also. I never knew about that, and I never heard anyone talk about that. But now that I have daughters in their mid-20s, I'm clearly aware that there is a thing called, this wound that your children give you. So much of our spiritual work, Ben, is to deal with the wounds in our life, to lean into them, to discover what is hidden there in those wounds. It's just like in the great hero stories. It's always in the wound that the gift, emerges in all the great stories. And they're trying to tell us something in the consciousness of the world, is this awareness that the deepest truths, the deepest wisdom, the deepest learning is always going to come from those wounds. I better stop.
This episode is going to be one of those that was going to be one of my favorites, because it opens up an undefined and unseen, unwritten, undisclosed world that I'm discovering. And however painful, sat here right now, I don't perceive I'm in any emotional pain right now until something goes wrong. Until something goes wrong, or someone pulls out on me at a junction. Right?
We just need the right prick, don't we?
We do.
I wasn't. Do y'all have that word?
we really do. I know I do.
I meant it originally like the little poke, but no.
So some guys are going to go, shoot, man, I want to become less stressed. That's what I'm listening for. And I just want some tips. Give me some damn tips of how I can do better in marriage, how I can do better with my money.
Yeah.
Give me this Give me this checklist, dude. Now women, okay, some women do, but women tend to have an ear for this. Guys are still stuck in this. Just give me a damn checklist, dude, and I'll just start ticking it off. Then everything will be better for me, right? And now I've invited you today to go, Jim, can you roll out the brick wall so these guys just run headfirst into it? This is going to be unwelcome information because these guys are already stressed. Right. And we're saying, dude, you got loads more work to do. You haven't even got started, right? Help us, Jim, help.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's some comfort on one level to know life is not about you figuring it all out, and getting it right. Like the boat is going to plane somewhere. I always thought I would eventually, at some point in here, I'm going to get this thing all working, all the juices flowing, everything's just right. And I'm going to ride this into the sunset, in my life. That's the story I was writing. And the problem was nothing was participating with me in that story. That other guy in front of me who, you keep pointing out, cutting in front of me, he's got his own damn story. He doesn't give a shit about mine. That's a religious word down here in Texas, by the way. So that doesn't kill anybody. But yeah, it's almost like we think. I remember David White, a poet that I listened to a lot, saying something along these lines, that it's like we think if we could just get the temperature just right in our life, the thermostat, if we work it where it's just the right temperature, that all those things that are bothering us and plaguing us will finally settle down and go away. And all the things that we are longing for will finally arrive, and we can get on with it now. We can really, everything is just right. And because it's just right, all these addictive kind of qualities that I have in my life will go away. And all these things that I've been longing for will now start, accessing them. And so we're always in this sort of perpetual waiting game. And in the meantime, we're stressed beyond our capacity. And all we have to do to know that is just look at what is happening in our cultures, the dominant cultures of this world, what we're giving ourselves to. And like you said, it's more of the same. So we treat our spiritual life just like we treat our business life. How do you get ahead? Well, you work 72 hours. Forget this 40-hour work week or whatever you guys have in the UK. Ours is supposed to be a 40-hour work week here in the United States, but nobody who's trying to get ahead works 40 hours, and we translate all that kind of getting ahead to our spiritual life, our romantic life. It's all about this sort of accomplishing something bigger and better. And it always puts us in this, as soon as you do accomplish something big, like let's say you do a great anniversary dinner with your wife or husband, and everything was right. You had the notes right, the flowers right, the candy, whatever it is that you did, the helicopter ride, it was fantastic. Well, what are you going to do next year? It just sets us up for more of the same, and we never seem to arrive at this place of just grace and beauty. And there's a story that I have found very meaningful that David White tells about his life. He was in the middle of he worked for a nonprofit organization. And one of the things that happens in all nonprofit organizations, there's this element that you're trying to, save the world. And you never quite complete it at the last board meeting. It's never quite finished. And you literally, if you're in a dedicated nonprofit, you're just running faster, harder all the time. It never stops. And he hit a wall in that organization. He tells a story that he walked into a large room where there were lots of his colleagues there and coworkers, and he yelled very loudly, "Has anyone seen David?" And everyone stopped and turned around and looked at him, and they all broke into laughter because he was the only David that worked there, and they thought he was doing something funny. Mm-hmm. And he sat there in horror because that came out of nowhere. He was not, apparently he needed to have a conversation with himself, is what he said. But he went home and it was a breaking point for him. He was literally exhausted, he said, and at the end of himself. And he left, he went home, and by coincidence, he had a Benedictine friend of his that was coming by, a priest, to visit with him. They read Rilke together, if I'm remembering right. And the friend came in, and before they could sit down or anything to him or do anything, he just said to him, "Speak to me about exhaustion." And he said it was in some sort of, he just felt it was almost penitential. Speak to me about exhaustion. And his friend, heard that. And he said, "Well, David, the antidote to exhaustion is not necessarily rest." And David said, he repeated it. "The antidote to exhaustion is not necessarily rest." And then he looks at him in desperation and says, "Well, then what is it?" And his friend said, "Wholeheartedness." Wholeheartedness. And that all by itself is disclosive. Whatever it is that you do, if it doesn't bring you alive, it's too small for you, David Whyte says in one of his poems. Wholeheartedness. But wholeheartedness does not mean perfection. It means everything is included. Wholehearted, your whole life. So whatever it is, the struggles, the graces, the things that are hard and difficult, and the things that bring you alive, they all somehow work together for this beautiful thing that needs to happen in our own becoming. And the sooner that we can accept that as human beings, the sooner we can stop cursing the guy that cuts us off in front of us. We can stop participating with this illusion that things are not supposed to all work out for me. Mm-hmm. That guy's not supposed to get in my way. You dumbass, what are you doing? Because that's an illusion that everything is supposed to work out just for me. Don't y'all know Jim Taylor is on the road? And if there is a great deliverance when we can stop participating with a story that makes us a victim, or makes us somehow getting a shaft, by someone else because he pulled out in front of us. It's supposed to work out for me in a special way, and then we can move on to now we can really be present to what's really real.
I think I think the best we can do here is help listeners say, "I didn't realize I was wearing a plaster." You guys call it Band-Aid. I didn't realize I was wearing a plaster on this. I've just seen I'm wearing a plaster. I had no idea it was there. And that's enough. If that's the only thing you come away, if you come away from this interview with like, what the hell are these fools talking about? That's right. That's okay too, right? Because There's something here that at some point you'll be able to benefit from a little bit more deeply than right now is all okay. And that notion of stress coming from, I'll be happier, this will be more like I want it to be when I get to blank. If you can hear you saying that, or if there's just somewhere in you, you just know that the place you're trying to get to, you're tearing yourself in half to get to, and yet you just know you're terrified to get there because you know you're going to be so unfulfilled. You already know that intuitively. So you make a whole bunch of problems to make sure you never get there because you know it's not really going to make you happy, right? Chasing the tail, the proverbial dog. So I think that story is such a beautiful place to park for the moment, Jim. Um, can you just for a few minutes talk? Again, this is too big a topic. Talk about male initiation, what that even means. If someone wants to read a bit more, go and learn a bit more about a path to walk to start to take some more of these plasters off, or wants to take their inner journey a little bit more seriously. Can you just shine a bit of light on that for us, please?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And one thing I would say with some confidence to the men that are listening in particular, you cannot do your spiritual life or spiritual journey alone. You can't, it's not something you can accomplish by yourself. Men need other men to find their transformation. Healthy men, grounded men to come alongside them. And it's in that camaraderie of the journey that real opportunity for transformation occurs. And you can see this in the wisdom traditions and the ancient cultures. They always took the young boy out. There was a certain point when the elders would notice, okay, he's ready. He's not just a child anymore. He's not a little boy that sits back there and, just plays all the time. And really, that's where he's living. Life is all about him. Everybody's serving him, And when he's ready, the elders would take him out, and there was this initiation process where they would ground him into some hard truths. Life is not all about you. Aha. And that's a rare message that a child will really get in a healthy way. And it's told in love. Look, you got to locate yourself, son, in the larger story of everything. Right now, you've written a story that's way too small for you, for everyone. And if you live out that story, it is only going to bring, sadness and
misery.
Yeah, it's a miserable journey. I'm thinking of all these cuss words. I'm trying not to say. It's not going to be good if you live out that story you've written for yourself right there. And so we're telling you, it's not all about you. So you need to, find the common good, find yourself in the midst of the common good for everyone and everything. I'd want to say, Ben, because we've been exploiting the more than human world as long as we've been alive. And when you're on a really enlivening spiritual journey, you suddenly everything is participating in that journey. So when you find yourself, men, if I'm speaking to men directly, I think women do this as well, but they do it differently typically. Men need to, at some point, there's an exchange, right? And like I said, some midlife, we see it, men going through midlife crises. Well, that's usually because they're not in a healthy group of men who can initiate them and take them into the next stage of their life. So 2 key points: when a boy is becoming a man, numbers are not great, but let's just say somewhere between 18 and 25, the boy realizes something. and needs to be brought into an adult conversation with everything. He needs to elevate. Life is not all about you. Life is hard, by the way, and you are going to die. What do these hard messages mean if they're taken into yourself as a healthy, generative young man? And so you develop a healthy ego. So we say you got to build your tower. That's all good, but we want you to build it in such a way that it's not to the exclusion of everyone else. It's all about your tower, you know? And whoever I have to step on to get there, well, you know, that's just the game. But if it's healthy, you won't participate in that kind of destructiveness. You won't abuse your power. Then there comes this point in second half life. So at some point when you're building your tower, it's not going to be doing it for you. So if you got guys listening that are, say, in their late 30s and 40s, sometimes it takes a while. If you've been successful, it's harder. So you might last up into your 50s. I see 70-year-old men still building I want to cuss again, a tower. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? You're still building a tower at 70? That's an unhealthy man, and an unhealthy culture would celebrate that. So when a man hits midlife, he should be jumping off that tower, we say. And he's moving into the stage of where you die before you die. You take off those masks. You die to the false self and all your successes, and you start looking for how the weaknesses and the failures and the struggles, you start looking there for gold. And you are more comfortable sitting with that reality in our culture. You can hold that container. And what I do now, I find myself sitting with younger men who've failed. Maybe they've lost, their marriage has failed, or their business has failed, or, you know, they've failed somehow morally. They've done something that they feel really shame about. I can sit in the middle of that now and hold it and just offer grace. Whereas if you took me back 25 years ago, I'd have been given them a to-do list.
Give me the list. Give me the list.
How to fix it, you know. So I want to give a poem.
Please.
It's a blessing, just a piece of it, by John O'Donohue. And it's actually called "For One Who Is Exhausted," a blessing. And he says in there, just towards the end of it is what I want to say. He says, "You've traveled too fast over false ground. You've traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. You've traveled too fast over false ground. Now your soul has come to take you back. Take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open up the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Taking time to open up the well of color that fostered the brightness of day." And then the last stanza, "Gradually you will return to yourself. Gradually you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time." It's a beautiful poem, and I hate to rush from there into the comment, but there's something about, if you know, you asked for what could I offer these men and women who might tune in, a pointer. You know, it's hard to become a holy man in a weekend. I often tell guys, they want
everything. Jim, you tried, right?
Right. You know, you just want 5 tips, you know, give me 5, you know, and I can stay alive. All the wisdom traditions say the same thing. You want to know what you don't know? Slow down. When you're moving at a pace that is so fast, you can't see anything worth seeing. You only see the prick in front of you. That's all you see. And if he's not moving at the same rate of speed you're moving or faster, then he is in your way. See? And that's the way you see everything. Everything is in your way. And you have a way of critically judging life itself. Life itself is in your way, by the way. It's all in your way. You don't even know what way you're going, what's on the other side of that interruption. You don't even know, but you think you do. But all the wisdom traditions say, slow down, slow down, slow down. Be still. And let the deep self, let God, let the deep self, the mystery find you in that space. Breathe, breathe, and breathe again. And when we do that enough, it has a way of grounding us into the really real, that which is important. A beautiful poem by William Blake. He said that stillness, that's the only part of his day where Satan cannot find him. I love that. And he didn't mean the devil. He just means the strategic mind that's always calculating, always trying to get ahead, trying to fix something, trying to get around something, trying to hide something. There's a lot of things we're trying to hide. But that stillness will allow you to accept even the worst parts of ourselves. And instead of hating them, we will bless them and forgive them. And it's in that forgiveness that we're set free. It won't be from some new spiritual program, that gives us a better strategy. I hope
I'm not going. I'm not going on Jim and Ben's spiritual program because they don't give me the right strategy to go faster, right?
Sorry, I don't have one.
You haven't got it. Damn, I've just wasted an hour of my listening time.
Maybe they can write in and tell us, because damn, I'd like to know too.
Every single, this is aimed at parents, fathers. Every single father is doing the absolute best they can right now with what they know. Unequivocally, I know that to be true. And hopefully some of these words, some of it might have just dripped into the right place where you go, I've been running so fast up this hill. I'm not even sure anymore if I'm running up the right hill. If that's you, that's great, because it might be just about time to stop and search for the wholeheartedness that I believe is a desire in every single one of us. So, Jim, we're gonna have to do this again, bud, because I know Kerry's gonna march up to this studio in a minute and say your dinner's ready and slap me around the head with a wooden spoon. Thanks for your time, brother, my spiritual brother. Who would have thought I needed to wheel in the pastor of a church? And it's given me the most X-rated swear-based content I've had of any interview. You know?
Yeah.
You get to underneath the shit, bro. You're getting underneath the crap. That's where Jesus went. That's where God wants us to go. He knows the gifts. We're looking at the wrong stuff. So
we're looking at the wrong stuff.
Bless you, brother. Thank you so much for your time, Jim. Just a quick plug. If anyone could go and find out more about Jim Taylor or what he does, is there anywhere we can send them?
Yeah, go to illumin.org. And it's a men's organization. Illumin.org.
I'll put that in the bio.
ILLUMAN. And it's a men's organization. I work with men who are trying to deepen their spiritual journey. So we are all in it together, Ben. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thanks, brother. Have a great day. I adore you, Jim.
Love
Bye,
you, brother.
dude.